Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little Slaw YouTube channel. So, in our past few days, I would say exactly for the last 7 videos on upskilling, performance testing, and performance engineering videos, we were discussing about various performance testing concepts where we were identifying the various factors to improve the performance testing during the as part of the testing process. But today in this video, we are going to see about how to improve the performance of a .NET application because most of the applications comes either under the .NET or the uh, Java applications, and so we are going to see about Java applications in the future. But for now, I'm going to introduce some of the concepts where we can improve the performance of the real time for the different .NET applications, and this will definitely help you, and this will definitely improve your level in to the next level where you can share your tuning recommendations or where you can navigate yourself to the performance engineering aspects. So before we move on to the video, this is me, Yasin Shanmugam. I welcome you all to our Little Sly YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't subscribed yet. And now, as part of this video, we are going to see the first part, which is how to create the high performance web pages. So this has several steps, but as part of it, I have narrowed down to several steps. And in this video, we are going to discuss about the first two steps of it because I do not want to load too much in one video. So I'm just giving you an idea on how to improve the performance with just two steps in this video. So the first step is to create high performance web pages, and for creating the or to improve the performance of the web pages, we have to begin by reducing the size of the web pages, and we have to minimize the quantity and the dimension of graphics, especially when users are on low network bandwidth. So if users who are on low network bandwidth are using an application using their mobile network which has 3G or 4G, they might, or the application might take a lot of time to load because of the huge dimension and the huge quantity of size the size of the web page. And then the next point is the organizing the web pages to take advantage of enhanced caching efficiency, because once the caching has been improved, there is no need of sending each and every request to the server to get their response. And then we have to turn off the view state for pages that don't require it. For instance, we can disable the view state for pages that don't interact with the server or those pages which are not utilizing the server control. So in those scenarios, we can turn off the view state, because by enabling them, there could be a chances of a little bit of latency, and the server might, or the client might wait for the server to interact or to send back or to respond back this view state. So in those scenarios, the response times might increase. So that's the reason we are telling a point where we can turn off the view state for those particular pages that don't require it. And in this case, we can disable the view state for pages that don't interact with the server and those which are not utilizing the server controls. And then we have to implement the batch compilation for the pages. And we can also enable the buffering to allow ASP.NET or the .NET batches to function efficiently on the server, and we can reduce excessive back and forth communication with the client. So by enabling the buffer, we can reduce the excessive back and forth communication with the client. And finally, by understanding the implementing implications of using the server controls in terms of performance, we can improve the performance of the web pages. So that's the step number one. And moving on to the step number two. So this is going to be more of numbers and more into the connections and the threads in the machine configuration. So the second part is how to improve the .NET thread pool performance. To make sure your ASP.NET application runs smoothly, you have to follow these steps. So if your application is waiting around with nothing to do, or it's not doing anything and it's just waiting, So you have to adjust some settings in the machine.config file. For example, you have to set the maximum connections to 12 times the number of CPUs, and you have to set the maximum input output threads and maximum worker threads to 100, and you have to set the minimum free threads to 88 times the number of CPUs, and you have to set the minimum local request free threads to 76 times the number of CPUs. So by doing all these, you can improve the performance, in fact through by improving the thread pool performance. And then if your application gets lots of requests all at once after being idle, you have to try increasing and decreasing the minimum worker threads and the minimum IO threads. So in fact, if your application has tasks that takes a long time to finish, so you have to tweak these following settings in the machine.config file. For example, you have to set the maximum connections to 12 times the number of CPU, and just a second, okay, and you can set the maximum IO threads and maximum worker threads to 100. So by testing your application without changing the minimum free threads, you can just check how well your application is working and how does the time it takes to finish a particular task is increased or decreased. And if it seems like the CPU is working too hard and switching between tasks too often, you can try reducing the maximum worker threads or increasing the minimum worker threads. So, in fact, if your application uses the ASP compat flag, you have to keep an eye on the total number of threads in the worker process, and also you have to make sure it doesn't go over this number, the number which I'm giving below here, which is like 75 plus, by adding the maximum worker thread and by adding the to the maximum IO threads and multiplying it to the CPUs, the number of CPUs multiplied by 2, we can get the total number of threads in the worker process, and this number will definitely help us to improve the ASP.NET or the .NET thread pool performance. So by doing this very first two tuning suggestions, the performance engineering thing, you can definitely see a better performance in your applications. And in fact, we have various other techniques to improve the performance, which we will see in our upcoming videos. But for this very first few things, because you can all these changes, which is basically the view state part, or by reducing the size of the page, by minimizing the quantity and the dimension of graphics, and by making changes to the patch compilation, or by understanding the implications of using server control. So all these are very basic things which I believe you can do it very well. And also by making changes to the machine.config file, where you can set the maximum connections, the maximum IO threads, and the maximum worker threads, you can very well see a better performance in the application. And you can try all these in your performance environment, so that before it moves to the production environment, you might get a better performance in your applications. So with that, I come to an end, and I believe this video would be very useful to you. So until I meet you in our upcoming video, in our next video, it's bye bye from Asan Shanmugam and Little Slaw.